Hello everybody, my name is Kelly Jo.
And I'm Tyler.
And we are both peer educators with the University Counseling Center here at APU. And today we are going to be talking about how we balance wellness, like staying mentally well while balancing like our work and our physical health and keeping our grades up and everything else that comes with living a busy life.
Yeah, as college students, we tend to wear a lot of hats. We do a lot of things, so sometimes it's difficult to kind of juggle all the different responsibilities and things that we need to do.
Yeah, totally. So we are going to now just talk about our own personal experiences with balancing like wellness amidst like our really hectic lives. Tyler, do you want to like share a little bit about yourself first?
Yeah, so when it comes to me balancing work life and school, I've said that there's definitely been times where it's come really naturally to me and a lot of times that I've struggled. So fortunately, I actually have a job that allows me to do homework at work. And so this is kind of a huge thing that's helped me balance a lot of things because it kind of lets me kill two birds with one stone in a sense. Because
nice.
Yeah, it's great. Like I get to kind of just knock that homework out while I'm at work, and then, you know, that leaves me, I guess, with less or more personal time to do other things, which is really great. But obviously not everybody can, you know, have that luxury, but I think maybe just the takeaway there that I've learned for myself is just to kind of be sort of strategic with the things that we choose to do.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that piece. I mean, I definitely like relate to like the challenge of having a hard time balancing things. There's definitely been times where like balancing my social life and keeping my grades up and like having a job, just balancing all of that has felt impossible. And I think it's something that like we'll probably all kind of like struggle with for the rest of our lives, and it's just about like balancing it, you know? So like something that's really helped me is like learning to say no to social things when I have other responsibilities, which is like so hard, but
yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah, in the long run it's helped. Also, like, I don't know if you use Google Calendar.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, but like that's helped me a lot, and like even scheduling out like hangouts and scheduling out even like when I'm eating and scheduling out like a bedtime, like those things really help me stay diligent when I'm super busy.
Yeah, that organization is huge. That's really good. I guess one of my little tips and tricks that I like to do is sometimes we tend to get burned out when we do a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
So I found that kind of keeping motivation up is kind of a crucial thing to be able to balance a lot of things like work and school. And one thing that I like to do is watch motivational YouTube videos. And as you know, silly as that sounds, it's actually pretty effective because you know it gets me in the right headspace to be motivated to do the things that that I want to do. You know.
Yeah, that's so good, and I'm like so glad that's helpful. I think like for me, something that helps is like exercise, like moving my body, not sitting all day, and even like taking time to like move around for just like a couple minutes between doing things. I also just think like realizing that we like aren't machines, we're like people that like, you know, we need social time and we need like to put healthy things in our bodies, and we need like to have like a balanced amount of time where we do schoolwork, and you know, just like realizing that we can't be perfect at everything all the time, that like has helped take a lot of weight off of my shoulders.
Yeah, that's definitely huge. I can really relate to that.
So do you have anything else?
Any final thoughts? I mean, I guess my biggest takeaway here from our conversation is just I guess that we all need to learn how to listen to ourselves, to kind of recognize when we're burnt out, when we need more organization, when we need less organization, because I guess relaxing and unwinding is a really big, important thing, especially when it comes to balancing a lot of things. And so that's, I think, something that maybe a lot of us can do better at.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think like resting is so important so we have the energy to like do the things that we need to do. You know, it doesn't only feel nice, but it's also just like so incredibly important. But yeah, thank you for sharing the things that were helpful to you, Tyler.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So like in your own experience, like what specific strategies have been like super helpful in like helping students balance their lives in terms of like balancing work and like their social lives and everything else?
Well, I think about compartmentalization, and I talk about that in family systems as well. It's like a couple loves one another, and I say that's one room in a house, and they're together. But then they each go into different rooms to work individually on something. And there can be many, many rooms in the house where you walk in one room, you spend some time there, and then you go to the next and you shut the door. So I think in the work-life balance, one thing that's really important is the recognition that you should use compartmentalization or blocking off pieces of time very, very directly for very, very intentional efforts when it comes to some particular project, but also blocking off periods of time for leisure activities and socialization. I often ask students, if I were to pull out your calendar book right now, which I guess now it's all on smartphones, but back in the day it was a calendar book you actually carried, I'd say, how much time do you actually have in your planner that is actually labeled leisurely fun? And it's like, oh, well, I don't have that in my planner. That's what I do when I finish everything else. And then I ask them, well, how much of the things that you have in the planner that you work on finishing take more time than you think they should take? And if so, how much leisurely time have you spent today, yesterday? How much leisurely time will you have tomorrow? Well, I'll get around to it when all the work is done. Well, when will that be? Well, I'm not really quite sure, but eventually I'll be able to take some time. So I believe in actually planning in your planner time that you're not going to do anything except hang out with a friend, go to the beach, take a walk in the mountains. Because if you just say, well, I'll do all of those things whenever I finished everything else, it'll rarely ever happen.
It's like just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen because we see like planners as something that we use to organize our life and business and academic activity or jobs or whatever. We don't see them as instruments where we put in downtime, leisurely time.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you. Like, what are some of the signs and symptoms of burnout?
Well, first of all, there's a greater degree of detachment. One just seems a little less present. Sometimes they'll have kind of a triggered reaction that suggests they're somewhere else. You might say, hi, John, how are you doing today? And it's just like, what'd you say? So it's almost like the inability to focus because you're using all of your energy in order to nurture burnout, to nurture depression, to nurture anxiety.
That makes sense.
I sometimes describe it like this, okay? We take in 2,000 calories a day, 1,800 maybe, and this is just to describe, the situation. Well, if we're not experiencing burnout, if we are not overwhelmed, if we are not anxious, tired, and depressed, then we have more energy to direct on important things like our relationships, our schoolwork, academics, our jobs, okay? But if we're nurturing a depression or anxiety or burnout, we've got so much energy trying to figure that out. Because when people are depressed or anxious, they're trying to figure it out. Like, why am I feeling like this?
Right.
That pulls energy away from, hi, how are you? Let's have a conversation. Hello, let me sit down and focus on this academic paper. Hello, let me sit down and focus on studying for this big exam. Hello, let me sit down and focus on my job. Instead, the energy to do those productive things is sucked up because it's all being used to try to figure out why you feel so bad. And so that's what's happening in burnout. And so I think people often don't see the symptoms of burnout, and so they just continue to push themselves harder and harder and harder, which can lead to anxiety and depression.
I think that's very true. I feel like
that's really helpful.
I feel like there's a lot of pressure for students to like if you're not burnt out, then like you're not trying hard enough.
Not with me. I don't know if you guys remember this, but we talked about dissociative disorders and abnormal psychology, and I may have brought it into personality. But what I tell people is dissociative disorders, to a profound extent, dissociative identity disorder, that would be like actually leaving the present moment and like, you know, going different places in your mind. For example, we see that with people who have been like severely abused, like children in human trafficking. They almost have to create different personalities. But lower level dissociation is actually healthy. So I tell I ask students, what is that? And they say, I don't know. Well, the lowest level of dissociation, which is healthy, is daydreaming. So I tell students, I want you to practice daydreaming. And I tell them, including in my class, and they go, what? What? I said, no, if you want to take a vacation to the Malibu in your mind, or to Hawaii, or when you were strolling down the beach with your significant other holding hands, just go there. But just come back in 3 or 4 minutes. I don't want you to stay there, but go there. And it's like, I've never had a professor tell me to daydream and check out during class. It's like, well, it's healthy. If you're driving, you're like a $250,000 sports car. You can cruise across northern Arizona at 100 miles an hour with the speed, and you won't even get tired. But if you never let that sports car rest, if you never change the oil, if you never let the engine cool down, you could have a 1972 rusted out Toyota Corolla only worth $100, and it might get you from A to B, but that sports car is eventually going to end up with a blown up engine going nowhere. So APU students are very, very smart and healthy and generally pretty well psychologically adjusted. However, if they don't unhook from that intensity and just check out sometimes, then they're unhealthy. And so you won't hear this from a lot of professors, but see, a lot of professors, they think you're supposed to, like, grind yourself into craziness with never-ending study, but they don't understand. Let's just say you accomplish all of your objectives and you become 35 years old and you've got like a doctoral degree and you've got a nice house and a nice car. You've done a lot of collateral damage in that process. And so you might be looked at as successful, but in reality, internally, you're melting down and you feel bad all the time because you pushed yourself too hard. Now, the opposite of that is, I want to stay checked out all the time. And that's wrong, because we have a moral responsibility to use the gifts and the talents that God has given us in order to become the best we can become in our service for Christ. That's the opposite extreme. I'm going to check out, take it easy, not focus on my work. That's the opposite extreme. But the comfortable middle ground is, no, I'm going to have, like I said earlier, compartmentalized, focused attention. But then, when the 50 minutes of the hour is over, I'm going to go out for a 15-minute walk rather than continuing to study.
Right.
And then when you come back, your head's fresher.
Yeah, setting like those boundaries.
You've got to have the boundaries.
Are so important.
Yeah.
Do you have another question that you want to ask?
Yeah, I have another a little question. Just for APU students, what kind of resources would you recommend? Because I mean, I'm sure a lot of people might relate to some of the struggles that we're talking about. What resources would you recommend?
The number one resource I recommend constantly, in fact, it's I've been chided for it by is Mrs. Cross still up there, Michelle Cross, and she checks people in.
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, she's a friend of mine and her daughter. So I've sent many people to the counseling center in the past, even to the point where it's just like, hey, Steve, I appreciate you, we love you, you're sending all these people here and that's good, but we have a 2 or 3 week backup now. And so my number one thing is, I believe every human being should get counseling, okay? So if I meet any student, whether they think they're well or not well, for personal insight, I suggest they do counseling. Yeah. I myself have had maybe 3 or 4 years of intensive counseling as part of my training and development from the time I was in my 20s until now. Counseling is not just for people who feel they're not doing well. Counseling is for insight and understanding. So that would be very, very important, all right, as kind of a clinical measure. Also, the support team here, like you two, for example, you know, you're out there and you're trying to educate students on the importance of mental and emotional health. That's important. So for faculty, I would want faculty to be really, really cued into, you know, all of the different resources available, and they should be reaching out to students and bringing this up in class. I don't know if that's the exact answer you wanted. It seems like that was not.
No, that's a great answer. That's
Okay.
really,
No, that was still helpful.
Yeah.
And I think like jumping on that, like, what?
No, I'm saying, yeah, no, I'm just kind of agreeing with you. You know?
Jumping on
When I
that.
hear something I like, it's like, oh, tell me more, but it might sound like, what? Did I say something wrong? No.
Like, but like adding to that, like how could faculty, you think, like change their perspective?
Oh,
You
that
know?
is so important. Oh my goodness. I wish all faculty members had done at least a moderate to significant amount of study in psychology because a lot of times they just think they default to some silly conclusion like the student's just lazy. It's like, are you kidding? There are students who are like taking care of parents, they're taking
Right.
care of siblings, they're driving long distances to school, they're really, really overwhelmed, and for faculty just to say, well, the reason you're failing is because you're lazy. The reason you're getting a C instead of an A is because you're lazy, you're not trying. You know, it's just like, that is so out of context.
Right.
Now, there are always a percentage of people who might fit that, but for the most part, I believe it's in the human will. Okay, volitionally, we desire to be successful. And if we're not successful, to blame it on laziness or not trying. So a lot of people, maybe in my generation, not me particularly, but in my generation, they may have had like parents paying for all of their school. They spent all of their time studying. Maybe they didn't have to have a job. But a lot of our students are under tremendous pressure. So I think faculty just need to be keenly aware of the emotional lives, the ups and downs, the tensions that students are experiencing, rather than default to some simple explanation like not trying, not motivated, or lazy, which is an insult to today's students.
Yeah, because it's well, because now it's like students have the expectation of like we should work almost like full time and also you know do school full time and also like be involved in things.
So my
And
question
also,
for you is, why do students feel that way? Have they experienced some external pressure telling them they should think that way, like parents and teachers?
I feel like it's a mix of a lot of factors. What would you say?
I mean, there's lots of different factors. I mean, I think life is kind of really expensive, you know, nowadays. So it's almost like you kind of need to like work as a student, you know, even if your parents can support you. But it's also, I guess, there's kind of a culture too of like kind of hustling. You know, have you heard about like kind of hustle grind culture, which is like kind of popular among young people today, where it's like you gotta get out there and do something and make money, you know?
Yeah, there's not a lot of like, oh, give yourself time to just like wander around and like, you know, like, or like meditate or like, you know, have leisure time. I feel like in today's culture, it's like, that's like, oh, you're just like wasting time, which is very untrue.
It's way untrue. I mean, Jesus retreated to the wilderness for 40 days to get away from people. Okay? So, by the way, getting away from people, which we call solitude, if we want to be euphemistic and we want to use a good term, rather than being like a loner or an isolated.
Right.
You know, solitude is very, very healthy for the soul. And so, you know, I always tell people, if you always need to be around people, that's not healthy.
Oh, yeah.
But if you never want to be around people, that's equally unhealthy. But so being around people and not being around people is like breathing. It's like when you take a deep breath, it's like, it feels good. You're pulling close to people. But then if you're around them too long, you're suffocating. You got to exhale and push them away. So it's the same in relationships when I talk about premarital work and talk about family. It's like, I love you, come close to me. Get away, I'm suffocating. I love you, come close to me. Get away, I'm suffocating. And so it's just like breathing is rhythmic. Even with couples or with friends or anything, there's a time for togetherness and there's a time for solitude. And that's really, really healthy. in relationships.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I introduced you to my wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I'm gone, it's like, thank goodness he's not here. But then when I come back, it's like, oh, I'm really glad to see you. So this is a little off base, but I tell people who are retiring, listen, when you retire, man, even if you love each other a lot, you want to get out of the house and you want to be around other people and spend some alone time as well as together time, because it's like, I love you, come close. Oh man, get away from me. And man, I wish all couples, I wish I could, 50% of the problems that couples have in dating is right there. She's saying, you don't want to be around me enough. And he's saying, you want to be around me too much. Or he's saying, you don't want to be around me enough. And she's saying, well, yeah, you want to be around me too much. Instead, they could easily work that out by like putting that in their calendar. Let's be together at these times and apart at these times. Anyway, I went off track.
That's still like super relevant though. Like students need to hear that too. So
that's a huge thing. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.